Alright, let me show you the Yaggie-boat method of storing vintage computers. Alright, if you've looked at the title of this video, it's how to store your old vintage computers. And unlike a lot of these other videos that'll make you watch an hour-long video just to find out the simple answer to what's in the title of the video, the answer I'll give you up front so you don't have to do that if that's not something you want to sit through the whole thing for. It is to store it upside down, your single board computers like these. Store them upside down, keep them out of the sunlight. Keep them in a cool, dry place. Keep them in a container that keeps the dust and dirt off of them. And whatever you do, don't store them in the attic. If they've got batteries in them, like let's say an Amiga 2000 or Mac Classics, where you have a battery on the motherboard, make sure you take that battery out. Recap any electrolytic capacitors. If you can't get to them, the storing it upside down part will help with that, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So if that's all you wanted to know, there's your answer. If you want a little more detail on that, keep watching. Okay, to cover a few points in the earlier statement, keep them out of the sunlight. What does the sunlight do to them? Turns them yellow like this. So you don't want to leave them out in the sunlight. This was done before I got it, by the way. And then also, store these things upside down. I'll get to that in a moment. But you can see where the sunlight hasn't hit it. This is the original color, and this is what it yellowed to. On the keyboard, since you're putting it in upside down, if you're not careful, the keys will be pressed in while it's being stored, and you don't want that, especially if it's in there for years. Put something under the keyboard to support the keys where they're not depressed inward, and store it upside down like this. Lastly, make sure you got a good container top, seals it from the dust and dirt, keeps off any moisture, store it in a cool, dry place, don't put it in the attic. And conversely, if you have some kind of keyboard cover, like on this Commodore 64, got a plastic cover. Try to do this. And if you'll notice, when it's in there, let me turn it the other way. It will support the way the keys, or the keyboard, without the keys being depressed. So you can safely store that one upside down. If your computer came with any sort of batteries on the motherboard, take those out. This is one that was in a base board for an Amiga 500. I'll show you that in just a moment. Pop that out. The ones like on an Amiga 2000 or some of the Macs and other computers, you'll have to actually desolder that battery. Those things will kill your motherboard if you don't get them out of there. If they haven't started leaking, which they probably have at this point, they will eventually. So get any kind of batteries out before you store your electronics. So you're probably wondering about the upside down part. So most of these older computers, these are mainly single boards that go in one direction. There's no daughter boards coming up vertically from these for the most part. This one, you'll notice it does have a baseboard, but it's the same way. It's a horizontal configuration. And the culprit behind this logic is right there and other places where you see those little blue dots. So let's get a closer look at those. Alright, the upside down logic part of it. Okay, see these pieces right there? There's a little one there. That is an electrolytic capacitor. It has a liquid electrolyte inside of it. And these are better quality. This is a mid-80s Amiga 500. These are better quality than the ones that came later in the early 90s in like the Amiga 1200. So these haven't started leaking, luckily, but they will eventually. So the best thing to do is just recap the whole motherboard. Take the old electrolytic capacitors out, replace them with new. Make sure you're doing electrolytic capacitors and don't replace them with those ceramic disc capacitors. Their functions are different, so don't be mistaken and put the wrong type in there. But you can get new versions of the electrolytic capacitors and you'll be good for another 20-30 years. But in case you can't get to it right now, or you're going to have somebody do it at a later time, the upside down storage might save you. So let's take a look at this motherboard a little further out. Now what you'll notice on this is all the components on this thing are on this side of the motherboard. There's nothing underneath component wise. Everything is on the top that we need to worry about. So if it's upside down, well, let's say it's not upside down. When this thing starts to leak as it's sitting right now, gravity will take effect. The leak will go down. It'll go onto the motherboard, and you've got some major damage. Maybe it ruins the whole thing permanently, depending on how badly the leak is. If you want to see a really bad leak, I've got another video where I had a battery in an Amiga 2000 that I bought that was original. It was in there from the 80s, still in there, and it had leaked on the motherboard. So, bad things can happen. So if it's upside down, the leak will go this way because gravity will have it pulling downward, and the downward will be in that direction. So what's above that? Well, you've got the keyboard, and if you can see on this one, it's just a solid metal surface on the end of it. It wouldn't hurt that at all if it leaked on it. If it did leak on the back of a keyboard that wasn't covered so well, it still wouldn't be as bad as leaking on the motherboard, in my opinion, because keyboards aren't critical pieces. The motherboards definitely are. So that's the logic in the storing it upside down part. Now if you look at this part right there, there was a disc battery in there. Those typically aren't as bad as the cylinder type batteries made by Varda and other brands. You'll see those in older machines as well. But whatever kind of battery you've got, take it out. Don't leave it in your machine. It's not worth it. If you have to, you can always, put it in a napkin wrapped up and put it in the same container you're going to store your computer in. And again, this strategy is for single board computers where everything's going horizontally and you don't have any other cards coming up vertically, because if you did, then you got two different directions you've got to watch out for with gravity leaks. So, okay, and that's my thought on that.